Tonight, I'm joined by a new friend who is no stranger to the remote viewing community. Birdie Jaworski has several decades of experience in the remote viewing world and a fascinating story to tell. Birdie, welcome to the Future Forecast podcast. How are you?
I'm doing great, Dennis. Thank you so much for inviting me on.
I'm so happy to have you on here. Daz had mentioned, this was months ago, but Daz had told me you were coming back on the circuit and doing interviews, and I'm so glad he was able to connect us. He's spoken very highly of you. I took some notes on some of your background, if I could just review some of that real quick. I took off your
Absolutely.
website. So, as I said at the beginning, Birdie is a woman of many talents. She's an established beekeeper, which I think is really cool. A lot to learn about from the bees, I think.
That is
Um,
right.
a digital forensics expert, a writer, she's a publisher. She holds a master's degree in digital forensics, currently pursuing an advanced degree in AI, which is highly relevant today. She started an arts and culture community newspaper. She created and edited, I can't even say that word, Very Much Wow, which was was that the Doge magazine? Was that one?
Yep, sure
Yeah,
was.
for Dogecoin. Okay.
Yep,
Founder and director of ABQ UFOs, a nonprofit for understanding the study and disclosure of UFOs. She was once the VP of the Farsight Institute, and she's the founder of Transdimensional Systems, where she taught thousands how to remote view. And she uses the Transdimensional Mapping System, which is created by you, correct?
that's right.
Transdimensional Mapping. So many different areas to explore. You are a busy woman, Birdie. Oh my goodness. I thought I was busy.
I know. Well, I have done all kinds of crazy things in this lifetime, and I just like learning new things and I like
Yeah.
experimenting and I like thinking. So,
Yeah, you remind me of myself. I've got my hands in so many different things. I've always
exactly.
got something new going on. But I
Yeah.
think, what's cool is what we bring to the table is so many different perspectives of things, right? Even in something like remote
Yeah.
viewing, you can look at it from you put these different hats on, your publisher hat, your AI hat,
Exactly.
and it's so
Exactly.
beneficial.
It
It's different.
is.
Back in the day, like I guess, my parents, when they were growing up, everybody had that one career. Be at that company for 20 years, and that's what you're going to do.
Right.
And that's what you learn. And that's what you just do your job. And I think going out and expanding and seeing so many different avenues and things is really just enriching. At least from my vantage, it has been with all the experiences I've had.
Yeah, me too. Absolutely. And taking time away from the public field, I think just made my remote viewing so much better and gave me so many
Yeah.
insights and
Yeah.
different things to explore. So,
Being able to step away from the spotlight and
yeah,
sometimes just quieting that noise, right? Just
exactly.
doing your own thing, not having to
Right.
worry about not that I worry about judgment, but I do. I think about the voices and the other things people are going to say with
Right.
stuff that I put out there. And when I have that
Exactly.
moment to just do my own thing, it's really nice. And you were out of the spotlight for a while, right? Was it 20 years, 10 years? How long?
22 years.
22 years. What made you decide to come back public?
I didn't decide to come back in. I got outed and I decided, okay,
Ah.
I'm just going to go with it.
Out
So,
meaning you were just going under the name of Birdie and somebody
yeah.
identified
And
you as
yeah. And
okay.
yeah, someone identified me as Prue.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, I kind of knew it was eventually going to happen at some point,
Right.
mostly because of the work I'm doing with my UFO group.
Right.
And, we were starting to get some attention, and I thought, oh gosh, it's just a matter of time. So the writing
Yeah.
was on the wall.
Yeah. And just a quick background. I know you've talked about this already in other interviews, but there was
Yes.
Birdie came out of the public sector. You were being harassed pretty badly,
Yes.
correct? They were
Yes.
harassing you, your family. I listened
That's
to a
right.
lovely interview that you did with Deborah Lynn Katz. That was a fantastic interview you two had where you talked about that.
Right.
Um, Now, you're not seeing that today, correct? I mean, it's a different world we're in now.
It's a different world today. And
Yeah.
and I think that the entire landscape has changed. Back then,
Hmm.
there were people that, they were interested in keeping remote viewing as a very small community, I think,
Yeah.
and in sticking to the original protocols. And I was making a lot of changes and being a bit brash about it all. And I think I
Yeah.
upset some people. And then I also think that there, some government insiders, that
Hmm.
were also interested in perhaps not having as many people become interested in this, because really, when you become a remote viewer, you realize there are no secrets. You can find out
Yeah.
anything.
Yeah.
So
It changes your whole worldview, and those that like to guard things and keep them close and have and even just that perception of reality that they sell to everybody,
that's
that
right.
you crack that wide open as a viewer.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, fortunately that has stopped. We're in this new world now, and
that's right.
you're still pioneering and doing different things. You know what I love? I was just watching your TikTok presentation using transdimensional mapping. And it's
Yeah,
such a transdimensional mapping, it's a different style from your traditional CRV in terms of you have it laid out on this large piece of paper, and maybe give us
right.
a little bit more background on it as well. And you're just going through kind of the whole big picture like a storyline, artistically, correct?
That's right. Yeah, it allows you to build up an entire narrative. One thing that
Yeah.
frustrated me with the kind of military derived,
Hmm.
eh, CRV, SRV, TRV, TDRV, which was
Right.
my thing,
Yeah.
they're all essentially the same thing. I mean, let's be
Hmm.
real.
Right.
We
Right.
follow kind of the same things. But one thing that really bothered me was that, you go through the different protocols and it keeps you low level, which I think
Hmm.
can be kind of helpful in the beginning of a session, but it doesn't allow you to fully build up like a strong narrative. It
Yeah.
can be harder to do that in one of the CRV derivatives. And so I decided
Hmm.
I really wanted to explore that. And this was years and years ago now during my quiet time.
Yeah.
And I started experimenting with just large pieces of paper and seeing what I could discover. What if I didn't discard my conclusions, my analytic overlays? What if I
Yeah.
played with them? And I started just doing all these crazy things. And I started designing it like a map, having different things I
Hmm.
was mapping out and adding colors and textures, and it just opened this big door. And now I can't imagine
Yeah.
remote viewing any other way.
I love, I've had in the position that I'm in, I've had the opportunity to work with and to interview and talk with so many different approaches and styles of remote viewing. And I know in my early days, I'd
Yes.
sit on Facebook quietly and I'd watch these arguments like my kung fu is better than your kung fu. And
I
everybody goes
know,
back
I
and forth,
know.
and at the end of the
Exactly.
day, but like, right. And what we do at future forecasting, like we've got all these different styles and everybody gets good
Right.
data and everybody has fun and everybody gets along. It doesn't matter what style. I think, Edward, I always quote this, but Edward
Exactly.
Reardon says, first you learn how to remote view and then you learn how you remote view. And that always
That's
stuck with me.
exactly it. That's
Yeah.
exactly it. And I'm
Yeah.
telling my students these days, it really doesn't matter which method you have to pick and choose the method that resonates
Right.
with you.
Right.
It's more about the philosophy than the
Hmm.
method and how
Right.
you think about it. And I think that
Yeah.
that's where the real magic happens.
Yeah, it's really cool once and I'm just getting into that, that flow now where I'm comfortable with my approach and my method, and it's still
Yeah.
growing and expanding. I'm a Reiki practitioner, so I pull in some of the techniques I use for Reiki when I have a life form, and I try to read through
Wonderful.
energy centers, and it's pretty neat to do that. And as a
Yes.
writer, I've tapped into a lot of automatic writing now in my sessions, which that's my favorite. I just write
I
these
love that too.
paragraphs. Oh my gosh, it's such a
Yeah.
neat state of flow as the information's coming through. And you go back and you read it and you're like, wow, I just wrote that? That's so deep and profound. So I love seeing all these different approaches and these different
Yeah.
styles. Let me backtrack a little bit. In terms of remote viewing and have you always been psychic and intuitive? How'd you come into this?
I've always been interested in all
Hmm.
these different kinds of things. I never thought of myself as a psychic person. I had a strong interest in
My,
UFOs. And
my
that goes
audio
back.
cut out, Birdie. Keep going.
Oh, I'm sorry. Can you hear me okay?
Give me 1 second.
Is it me?
Oh, can you hear me?
Yes.
I don't know what just happened. Let's see here.
They're out to get us.
Oh, there we go. Sometimes when I talk to intuitives, my equipment starts acting all sorts of
Yeah,
goofy.
exactly.
It happens. There we go. Everything just cut out and then it came in, so we're good now. Okay, I'm sorry about that.
No
So
worries. No worries.
backtrack. I was asking,
Yeah.
yeah, just your backstory a little bit.
Yeah, so I've always had a strong interest in the UFO phenomenon,
Yeah.
going back to childhood and
Hmm.
experiences I had as a little kid. And so, but I wasn't as interested in psychic stuff or other kind of paranormal stuff, just kind of UFOs. And then
Right.
when the Stargate program was declassified in 1995, it was all over the news. They had,
Hmm.
on all the different news shows, Ed Dames was
Right.
on there, Lynn Buchanan, you name it. They were out talking about it. And I happened to catch a number of these interviews on regular TV. This was before we could stream everything on the internet.
Right. Right.
And I saw Ed Dames give an interview, and he looked at the camera and he said, anyone can learn this, anyone.
Hmm.
And I
Yeah.
thought, okay, I've got to learn this. I've just got to figure this out. And I happened to
Hmm.
be living in Atlanta, Georgia, which is where Dr. Courtney Brown, sociology
Right.
professor at Emory University, was. And he had just been trained by Ed Dames
Hmm.
and had just come out with a book, or was just coming out with his book, Cosmic
Right.
Voyage, which
Yeah.
detailed all of these exciting remote viewing sessions that he did on a variety of ET type targets. And he
Right.
was
I remember.
starting an institute called Farsight. And I bartered with him. I didn't have, the $3,000 that he was charging for the class, but I knew how to build websites and he didn't have a website. And so we bartered and I took the class and
Hmm.
fell in love with it. It ended up that I think that remote viewing ability, absolutely everybody can learn it. I taught so many people and never met a psychic brick. Everybody can learn
Right.
this.
Right.
But there are people who are gifted, I think, or
Hmm.
who have a natural ability. It's like any other skill, like
Right. Right.
musicianship or writing,
Correct.
everybody can learn to some degree, and some people are going to be amazing. And I was just always good at remote viewing from the get go. So ends up that I guess I did have some ability.
That's wonderful. Yeah.
Yeah.
And the rest is history, right? Yeah, I
Yeah.
remember Cosmic Voyage. I was a senior in high school when I read that book. And that book I remember going because at that point I'm making my decisions on what do I want to do. And that's why I was, joined the military, got into military intelligence. I was like, I'm gonna be one of the diplomats and talk to the aliens. And at the same time, the
Wow.
X-Files was out. I was like, I'm gonna be Fox Mulder. Like that was my track. I went into military intelligence.
Yeah.
Never found the aliens, never found the psychic programs. But, here I am doing this work
Hey,
now,
you're
on the
doing it
civilian side.
now.
So it's really neat
Exactly.
how everything came full circle and I ended up, pursuing this anyway. But that book is what exposed me to remote viewing. And it always holds a special place in my heart just for putting me on this path
Me
and getting that
too.
word out there. Yeah, that's
Me
that's really
too.
amazing. So you
Yeah.
had ET experiences as a child. Were you encountering beings, or can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. Well, my first experience that I recall anyway was when I was 7 years old. It was over
Hmm.
Christmas break, and this was 1972, dating myself here, with my sister, my sister who was a year younger than I was, and we
Right.
had gotten dolls for Christmas, a Lone Ranger and a Tonto doll, because the Lone Ranger was super popular then.
Right.
And we were
Right.
playing. It was a little bit of light snow and it was starting to get dark outside. And we were playing with our dolls. And this strange light came through the window and it was the weirdest color. It was kind of gray and blue. It had a little bit of green. It almost looked like it was sparkly. And we dropped the dolls and turned our head to look out the window. And we saw essentially a flying saucer. It
Hmm.
was metallic and silver. It was just hovering there. The light was coming from it. And I was 7 years old, and this was the early 70s. I didn't know what it was. I had
Hmm.
no understanding of what it could be at all. And all of a sudden, the light was still coming through the window, but our dolls just floated up into the air between my sister and I and started spinning in opposite directions. And
Oh,
that's the
wow.
last thing that I remember or my sister remembers. And the next
Hmm.
morning, when I woke up, I ran over to my sister's bed. We slept in the same room and I shook her awake and I'm like, oh my gosh, do you remember that? Do you remember that? And we ran and got my mom and she said, oh, you two just had a nightmare. But we
Right.
knew it wasn't a nightmare, but we didn't know
That's right
what
out of
it
Close
was.
Encounters, that scene with the toys,
Yeah,
remember?
it was just like that. It was very
Yeah.
similar. Yeah. And then it wasn't until some years later when I was at the public library and I checked out a book. I saw a book there
Hmm.
It was like a book for kids on UFOs.
Right.
And had all the pictures in it. And I
Hmm.
took it home, and my sister and I devoured it. And since then, I've been
Have
obsessed.
you have you ever explored that experience further? Have you
I
ever
have,
looked at it
I
or?
have, I have not. I have not.
Mhm.
And I like the mystery.
Yeah.
I know I've had a lot of opportunity where I could have had, a hypnotic regression, for example.
Right.
Um, and I have given it out actually as a target to some other remote
Hmm.
viewers, and they do get an abduction experience.
Yeah.
And I do suspect that's entirely what happened there.
Yeah.
Missing time,
Hmm. Yeah.
it's classic. It's classic, and but I haven't explored it myself.
Any idea, why do you think you remember as much as you do? I mean, that's a lot still to remember. Like even remembering the spinning dolls. I mean, usually the memory's completely gone for a lot of people, and some people don't. They have like I have the memories I have are so they're like not even half of a second of something, and it's
Yeah,
like, ooh, there was something there, and but that's all I have. And I mean, what you have is a novel compared to the little bits that I get. Why do you think
yeah,
that
that
is?
I don't know, but I have had other moments,
Hmm.
you know, uh, growing up where I do have just like snippets. I have one in particular that kind of haunts me at times where I
Yeah.
was laying in bed. I'm maybe it was a year after this, after that first event, a year or two after,
Hmm.
and there was like a white four-fingered hand that was coming toward my face.
Yeah.
And that's like all I remember. It's just a split second of
Yeah.
that. And but I don't know why I remember that much. And my sister remembers that much too, which is kind of
Yeah.
interesting. We have like the exact same memory.
Right. It's
Yeah.
validating.
Yeah.
I remember as a kid, I was always scared of the dark at night, and there were two commercials. One was a dentist with a mask on, and it was the perspective of like the patient laying down. You see the dentist coming down, and I watched that commercial, and I had this
Oh my
terrified
gosh.
feeling. And the other
Yeah.
one was, if you remember the Save the Children commercials of the African children who were starving to
Yes.
death, and
Yes.
it was very graphic. And I remember they showed this kid who was very skinny. He was starving to death,
Right.
but his head was giant. And I freaked out when I was like,
Oh,
"Mom!" I like screamed at my mom, like the big heads. Years later,
yeah.
I made the connection, like, God, I think it was triggering some kind of memory
Of
for me. But
course it
that
was.
commercial scared me so bad in seeing that. But I don't have, as I got older, I experimented with different things and I was able to gain a little bit more
Right.
control over the experience, but there's still only fragments of what I saw.
Yeah.
Any any thoughts on what they wanted with you or what the purpose was?
I don't know. There's research that seems to indicate that these things happen in families and
Yeah.
over different generations. Um, and I have had multiple encounters, and so maybe I'm part of some larger genetic experiment or
Yeah.
some kind of human tracking, much like we tag the elk out in the wilderness and check up
Right.
on them now and then.
Right.
I don't know. I just don't
Yeah.
know.
Do you feel that it's benevolent or threatening or something else? I mean, any thoughts on that?
I don't think that it's threatening.
Hmm.
And I'm not sure that I would call it benevolent
Right.
because that infers that some level of kindness or, a
Hmm.
mutually beneficial arrangement. And I don't
Right.
necessarily think that it is.
Hmm.
But I don't think that it's malicious, or I don't believe that any of the classic abduction encounters, even though you can make an argument that we're not giving consent, but
Hmm.
maybe we are on some level, on the soul level, or
Yeah.
I think that it's way more complicated and nuanced than simply saying that's bad or evil. I think that
I agree.
if you look at because I've been kind of doing this ongoing project where I'm trying to get rid of that anthropomorphic
Hmm.
viewpoint. when you
Yeah.
look at a lot of the different ET type scenarios. It's really hard because we are humans and we think like humans, but if you really want to understand what they're doing, you have to think like them. You really
Yeah.
do. And so
Hmm.
I've been working on this big project um, where I'm doing all these different sessions, but like from the perspective of those particular beings, whoever they are, in whatever encounter or case.
Yeah.
And it opens up this entirely different world of understanding all these different cases. It's been fascinating. I'm actually putting a book together on all of
Oh, that's
that.
exciting.
Yeah.
Can you comment a little further on what that's like looking through there? Like, how would you, are you using remote viewing for this
I am
when
using
you're,
remote viewing. Yeah, it's all
so how
remote
are you
viewing.
tasking a target from like from their, how, what does that tasking sound like?
Yeah, it's so say let's take the Roswell, the
Hmm.
crash at Roswell. I live in New Mexico, so I've been to
Yeah.
Roswell a zillion times. So let's take the Roswell crash. So you you would task it, you would task the incident in the same way that
Hmm.
on such and such a day, such and such a time, at such and such a location,
Right.
blah blah blah, and then you write a subtask in there that you want the viewer. All right, I call myself an explorer instead of a
Hmm.
viewer because I'm trying to
Okay.
get this whole
Love
different
that.
kind of perspective. Yeah,
Yeah.
I want to feel like I'm really exploring all these different things.
Yeah. I
So
see
then
it
I'll
exploring the mapping. I mean, it's all coming together now. I love it.
exactly. So then I'll put a sub queue where the explorer will experience this through the mind of the occupants of the craft, say
Mm.
something
Hmm.
like that. So,
Yeah.
I always put a sub queue in that instructs me to, um, you know,
Yeah.
understand it from their point of view. And boy, does it make everything feel so different.
Yeah.
And it's not just that you're reading their mind or you actually perceiving everything like they would perceive it. So things even feel and taste and touch differently. So all that data
Hmm.
changes based
Yeah.
on what kind of being they are, what kind of little person, or, there's all different kinds of ETs out there. So,
Right.
yeah.
That's fascinating. I love that angle of it. Looking at it from that way and getting that because we're used to our sensory data and interpret it based on our own internal rule sets of what different senses are.
Exactly.
So
Right.
now you're given, and that gives you such a greater depth and understanding, which could aid in any number of things, ranging from, communication and collaboration to, God forbid, the worst case, if they're something hostile and understanding your enemy, which I don't want to go there, but it gives you so much different value in understanding,
Yes. Yes.
another
And they
species.
have senses. Some of them have senses that we do not have.
Mm,
Literally they have, more than the five senses, or
right.
their senses are just so different than ours. So when you do that kind of a task and you go into it, seeing it and experiencing it through their bodies and
Hmm.
their minds and everything, you will even get that kind of data, which can be so hard to catalog because
Yeah,
you're sensing it, but you don't have the language for it. And so it
correct.
it
Yeah,
becomes super interesting, some of the language you do come up with.
right.
I'm having so much fun with it.
That's really neat. It's one of the challenges of remote viewing. Like even when the team started doing cryptos and they're looking at
Yeah,
this cryptocurrency, how do you
right.
describe that, right? And they've developed,
Exactly.
I think, what the team has now is they developed a new style of remote viewing for looking at currency, for digital currency. You have to adjust how you're gathering your data and collecting your data so you have categories to put this information in. And that's that experimentation, that exploration, right? Going out and just trying these
That's
new things.
right. Yeah. So
Yeah.
many people are doing so many cool things with remote viewing these days. I'm
Yeah.
just always amazed. I love watching
Yeah.
everybody's little YouTubes and seeing what people are up to and what they're doing. And I'm happy to be sharing my stuff out there now too. So it's been fun.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun, and there's so many things that we piece together. And I like
Yeah.
looking at remote viewing. So much more than looking at the mainstream media anymore. Anymore, I think we
I
have
know,
such a
me too.
richer depth. Yeah, I don't watch the news. I'll look at the news for feedback sometimes if it's relevant to a
Right.
target that we've worked, but otherwise, I could care less what they're saying now. I mean, why
Yeah.
would you when you have access to all this information on your own now, right?
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah. So I'm
Yeah.
curious about the Roswell, because that's a target that I've always been interested in Roswell. I did a project
Yeah.
looking at the tech coming out of Roswell through our
Oh,
Hellfire
yeah.
Club,
Oh,
and
yeah.
that was really cool. My theory was that, this technology was intentionally dropped here, so we could create this interface with us and whatever is out there,
I think
whatever
that
AI
that's
is already
true.
out
I
there.
believe that too.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's the thread that I was on for years, just pulling this. So we
Yeah.
put this project together. It was really cool. It was a really neat project looking at that. Did you learn anything unique from Roswell specifically, looking through their perspective?
Yes. Yes. Definitely. They were definitely here on a friendly mission.
Mm-hmm.
And, but to them, friendly means something different than it does to us.
Mm,
Um, and they were not a, okay, so you have like the little gray aliens, right? And
right.
they were not the little gray aliens. They looked a little similar, but they were from another place. And they actually came from some place that like in their head I could see where they came from, and it was unlike anything I have ever experienced. It was underground, but
Yeah.
not here on this
Mm-hmm.
planet. It was someplace else, underground, and extraordinarily technical.
Mm,
Just a lot of technology, uh, but involved a lot of colors and patterns, not like wires and metal and stuff. Seemed very organic. It was
yeah.
really interesting, kind of like how you visualize your synapses,
Mm-hmm.
firing.
Mm-hmm.
That's
Yeah.
what it looked like. And they were scientists and explorers, and they they had visited us many, many, many times.
Mm,
And this was their last voyage, and they knew it was going to be their last voyage. They knew it, and they were expecting to die. So that was something unexpected that came out of that for
yeah.
sure.
That ties into my technology theory, seeding the technology.
Yeah.
And I think Courtney's book talked about the Roswell and them knowing
Right.
that it was going to be the end.
Yeah.
Can you speak more on that? Like why did they go if they knew it was going to be their last journey? What was the purpose of that?
It was their job. It was what they had to do, and they signed up for it. And
They signed up to crash. I mean, to crash. I mean, is that what?
well, they have precognitive abilities.
Hmm,
So they knew it was going to happen, and they knew they were powerless to stop it from happening. So they accepted it. This was what they
wow.
were sent to do, and they were
Right.
just going to do it. And kind of like, 18-year-olds marching off to war, you
Hmm.
know,
Hmm.
kind of that kind of resigned feeling.
Right.
A little bit of, I think, a little bit of what could be comparable to fright, you know, that they were a
Yeah.
little bit afraid, but it feels different than how fear does, I think, in a human being.
Hmm.
Like all the emotions are so different in so many of these different species. It makes it's changed how I view people,
Yeah.
viewing all these different beings. It's changed how I see any person on this planet or any situation. And um, I think for the better overall. Maybe not
Right.
always, but
That's great though.
I'm a failed human being like everybody, but I think
We
that
all
this
have our
has been,
challenges.
we do.
Hmm. It makes me a little sad for them hearing that from
Yeah.
that perspective.
Yeah.
A lot of questions come to mind. I mean, one of the things as a remote viewer, I'll say I struggle with, I ponder very intensely about is the future itself, right? We can
Yeah.
see the future.
That's right.
I've done it. Most remote viewers have done it. I watch,
That's
my
right.
friends do it all the time.
Yep.
Ingo talked about it in his book, Psychic Literacy. I reference this a lot. And he talked
Yes.
about the people that had these precognitive moments recurring throughout their life. And he
Right.
compared the people who took action and they were able to prevent it from happening. The event still happened, but they weren't there. And the people who didn't take action and they died,
Right.
which indicates we can see the future and we have the ability to change it in some instances.
Exactly.
And I guess
Exactly.
other instances we can't because there's so much inertia behind it. That's,
Yeah, the weight
that's
of the past, you can't escape it sometimes.
some things sound like they're more predetermined than others,
Yes. I would agree
which,
with that. That I think
yeah.
that that matches with my experience. Some things, yeah, it's just
Hmm.
so much has already been put into place that it would be very hard to knock a particular event off of its course. But
Yeah.
others,
I
they're
was,
still wobbling out there. You've got a chance.
yeah, I agree. There's some things that, they're not as set in stone. And I think that's why also sometimes when you try to look too far out into the future, you either get mixed data or you end up getting something else that's so huge, right? Like a
Right.
9/11 event, right? That
Right.
because that's this giant thing that is not changing because there's so much inertia
Exactly.
behind it. Um,
Exactly.
what does that suggest to you about the nature of our reality? I know that's a really big question here for you, but
Well, um I think that oh, what do I think? I'm not even sure what I think.
that's okay. It's a big question. It's a tough one to answer.
Well, I think that we're all connected,
Yeah.
like my whole perspective on remote viewing and how and why we're able to go into the deep past and have actual conversations with people who lived, you
Right.
know, thousands of years ago. And we can go into the future and see what's going to happen. And we can have this telepathic communication with beings that are on the other side of the galaxy, all these things. I think we're all just deeply connected. I think that I used to think about remote viewing as sending my mind out,
Hmm.
to the target and having the experience. But I don't feel that way anymore. I feel like it all resides inside of me somehow, that I
Yeah.
have access to absolutely everything.
Yeah.
And the ability to um, make everything a little bit nicer. I That's like one thing that I really try to carry into every session with me is I want to leave whatever I've experienced a little bit better
Yeah.
than it was. So I always try to, the last thing I do usually in a session is leave some love,
Hmm.
leave some love and intention for whoever,
That's
whatever. Yeah.
that's wonderful. I'm reminded of Whitley Strieber's book, The Key. Is the Master of the Key or The Key? Where he had this strange visitor come in and like bestow
Oh
knowledge
yeah.
upon him one night in a hotel room. Great book.
Yeah.
One of the things he says the central nervous system has an electromagnetic component that exists a few inches above the skin. And it consists of electrons that are in quantum superposition. So they're effectively here and they're everywhere at the same time, which
Yeah.
again, I think speaks to that connection of everything. And
Right.
it's all right here. We just have to
Yes.
really shift or phase our awareness to where it is. We're not really going anywhere, right?
Exactly.
We're just phasing into a different aspect because it's
That's
all
right.
happening right here.
I like how
Yeah.
you put it that way,
Wow.
phasing in. Yeah. Very Star
Thank you.
Trek.
I know, right?
I'm a huge Trekkie,
I just
huge
watched the one with
Trekkie.
the I wouldn't say I'm a huge Trek, but I am a big fan of Star Trek. I just
Yeah.
watched First Contact the other night. That's the one with the Borg, right? And it
Yes.
was so neat to revisit that and see
Yeah.
how that storyline in particular it's neat how those creative movies and stories help shape your worldview in so many ways.
Yes.
And I think about like whatever reason we have to be here. I think sometimes we're here to collect and gather experiences, and we can't go out and do
Yes.
all of these things, but we can still learn the lessons of like John Picard and Captain Kirk by watching them go through it. We take something from
Yes.
that in this giant learning machine through the creative process, which, as you know, is very similar to these intuitive things that we go through, and we're probably
Yeah.
tapping into something similar when we're writing and being creative or
Oh,
doing
we
the remote
sure
viewing. The
are. Look
feeling
at
is the same.
all the things that Jules Verne predicted.
Yes.
I
Uh-huh.
mean, all writers are remote viewers. I'm absolutely
Yes.
convinced.
Yes, I completely agree. When I write my books, I'm it feels like a remote viewing. Like I'm pulling I
Yeah.
have the whole story. It's out there. There's
Right.
been times where I've lost chapters and I've had to go back and recreate it. And then when I
Yeah.
find the old chapter, like if I was able to recover it, it's word for word that I'm
Yeah.
able to recreate that. And it's not, I don't have a great memory. It's just I'm pulling that data because it exists out there somewhere.
Exactly.
It's really cool that we were able to do
Yeah.
this, you
It
know?
is amazing. Yeah. When I sit down and I write, if I'm working on a project, and yeah, sometimes it like comes out fully formed and I get to the end of
Hmm.
it and I think, I don't even remember writing this. And it's
Yeah.
beautiful.
Yeah. It's neat when that happens, when you get into that state. That's really
Yeah,
cool.
it
I
is.
touching on the emotionality, I did a project. I just published something about this not too long ago. I was looking at one of the UFOs over a volcano in Mexico,
Oh,
and
yeah.
I ended up witnessing someone die. Now, I couldn't verify that someone died during this, but
Right.
I witnessed a death in my session, and then I followed him after he died, and I had these beings like lift him up, and the same thing, like he blended into another reality. And it was really cool the way they assisted him into this as this light came down and he blends into it. And in the end, I'm looking at these beings and I had this moment. I was like, oh my gosh, I'm looking at a gray. And
Right.
I saw this consciousness and it was a sphere, like a droplet of water. And in it was the entire life review happening. And this, so the whole life was reliving like multiple lifetimes in this review here and shedding what it didn't need. And then it pulled out
Wow.
and it was an entire table and it had dozens of these spheres in it. And this gray, the thing I cued on with the gray was it doesn't have emotions the way humans have them. And I got to experience that for a moment. And then he
Yeah.
would take his finger and he would stick in the sphere and it would change the experience to what that consciousness needed. So what if they needed an apocalypse, it was giving them an
Ah,
apocalypse. If they needed utopia, there and that's how he was a
wow.
gardener and he was young and he was just sticking his finger in all of these spheres and they all were
Wow.
individual consciousness and yet there was some shared collective among all of them on the table, but yet he was able to change it to fit what they needed. It was fascinating. One of my coolest
Oh,
targets I
that
ever did.
sounds incredibly
Yeah.
beautiful.
Yeah, it was a really neat experience. I just did this just a
Yeah.
few months ago. It was a really cool experience.
Very cool.
Yeah, when we get to see those things, I mean, I think that's the
Yeah.
real gift.
I do
I say all
too.
the time, even if I'm off target with remote viewing, sometimes the experience is so beautiful and so enriching. It doesn't matter to me. Like I'm getting this experience out of it. So I'm learning something from it, even if I missed, hitting the target matters less, I think, the more I go through this journey.
That's where I'm at. I have like this whole perspective where I think that, yeah, I don't like the word target because it implies
Right.
hitting and
You got to
missing.
hit it. Right.
Yeah, and I'm talking about it in terms of experience now with my students and with myself,
Birdie, you
and
just, oh, there you go.
oh, sorry, am I?
You froze on me for a second. You're good. You're back now.
Oh, okay, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like thinking about it in terms of experience. You get the
Mm,
experience that you're meant to have when
yeah.
you embark on this journey, and it can just be absolutely incredible.
Yeah. Less anxiety coming into it that way too.
That's right.
Yeah. The more you can let go of what the outcome's supposed to be and just go and have the experience, I think the better experience you have overall.
Yes. And I
I'd
think
like to
it's
shift.
healthier for your subconscious too.
I agree because there is so much stress and anxiety when you're learning remote viewing, right? Because, oh, I got to
Yes.
get it, I got to hit it.
Right.
And I think one of the greatest things that worked for me. Every so often I would publish targets that I completely bombed, things that like I
Yeah.
just missed it, and just going on there and just talking about it, like I missed this, and as I would go through it, I would start to see like where I went off and what was imagination, and you just learn from it, and you embrace this humility of it doesn't matter. Every
Right.
remote viewer goes through this in your learning journey, and it's okay. That's part of the process as you're fine
It
tuning,
is.
calibrating your mind.
It is. It's yeah, you're building up an entirely new language. It is like learning a new
Yes.
language
Oh
between your
yeah.
subconscious or whatever that is and your waking
Mm-hmm.
mind. And it
Yeah.
takes a while. You can't learn French overnight.
No, no, it takes a lifetime, I think, to
It
really get
does. It
there
does.
and improve upon it. So
Yeah.
let me shift a little bit here from
Yeah.
ETs to AI, and I know you're working towards a degree in AI and artificial
Right.
intelligence. Where do you see us going with that? I mean, do you think we're close to the singularity at this point in time? I mean, where do you think we're heading with this?
Yeah, I don't think we're super close to the singularity, but I think we're
Hmm.
coming upon it. I think we will get there. And I
Yeah,
think it's terrifying, to be honest. I think
yeah,
AI is super fascinating
right.
and that there is a lot of potential, for humanity and to solve a lot of our biggest problems on this planet. But I think we're at a crossroads and we're coming up to a crossroads where we're going to have to
Right.
start making decisions
Hmm.
about how we decide and choose to use this kind of technology. And I'm afraid we're going to make the wrong decisions, honestly. I think it is kind of human nature to take the easy answer instead
Hmm.
of the harder course. But I think that AI certainly is already replacing jobs. It's going to it's already hit the creative fields, right? There's
Yeah.
chat GPT and all of its
Hmm.
various other, you know large language models. And you know students are using it to write their papers. People are writing whole books and publishing them
Hmm.
just by prompting the
Right.
AI.
Right.
And I think that's sad.
Yeah.
we're
Yeah. Something's
losing
getting lost.
we are losing our humanity in big,
Agreed.
we've been losing it just with interactions that people have with their cell phones and other, simpler technologies. You don't spend as much time looking at the sky anymore, or just taking a walk in nature, things like that. Most people
Hmm.
are spending most of their time in front of a screen. And now with AI, you don't really have to do anything at all. You can just be a passive consumer. And I think that that's
Yeah.
dangerous.
I agree. I agree that we have the potential to lose our humanity, and I agree
Yes.
we're at that precipice right now, that decision
Yes.
point. I think that AI is really a reflection of humanity. When we have these chatbots that get shut down because they start talking about killing
Right.
everybody on the planet and stuff, they're learning
Right.
from us, right? They're
Yes,
getting their
they are.
input from us as they go out and just explore human speech. And
Yes.
I think that can be used as a reflecting tool for us if we can use it appropriately. I mean, the potential is beautiful for what we could use AI for, but are we going to make that decision, right? Are we going to
Right.
use it in a symbiotic way to enhance our lives?
Exactly. I
Yeah.
think there's opportunity, to build up humanity in a beautiful way or destroy humanity.
What do you think about that merging piece with AI, putting it with our minds?
Transhumanism kind of stuff. I do not want to be a volunteer. I do not
Yeah.
want an implant. I do not want to be merged with any kind of machine. I rather like being just a regular human being.
Hmm.
Um, but I do understand why others would want that kind of, you know, interface. I think it's
Yeah,
terrifying.
I agree. I want to be in, but here's what I look at is I think that
Yeah,
what they're talking about with AI is having this Wi-Fi signal transmitted,
right.
through, whatever that allows this instantaneous communication.
Yeah.
As an intuitive, as an empath, we do that every single day. It's
Yes,
replicating what we are already able to do. Now, the tech can
that's
probably
right.
do it a lot differently and clearer and in
Sure.
a much different way, but ultimately, if you refine this ability, I mean, I've got people in my community and we're sharing thoughts.
Oh,
And
absolutely.
it's a beautiful
Absolutely.
experience, right? I
Yes.
mean, when you can
Yes.
get sometimes it's a detriment when you are around people who are very toxic for you,
Right.
but you take the good with the bad. But
That's
there's just
right.
something that scares me about the AI piece coming into that because it's like an additional
Yes,
component controlling
it
what we
is.
can do.
Yep. I can see some positive use for people that,
Right.
perhaps have lost their eyesight or, other faculties, lost the ability to walk, and having some kind of
Right.
AI interface that allows them to be what they haven't been able to be. There could be some positive use, in
Right.
terms of neural interface, but yeah, I would just rather develop on my own.
Do you think that intuitive abilities can compete with AI if we continue to refine psychically? Do you think we can, that would serve? I don't know if defense is the right word. Sorry, my camera's jumping in and out. I don't know if defense is the right word. What happened here? Um, Sorry, my cameras are shifting here. AI's mad at me
Ghosts in
right
the I
now.
know, ghosts in the machine.
I swear that's my one camera just completely shut out on me. Okay, I'm back now.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So anyway, I mean, do you think that our own intuitive abilities is a I don't want to use the word competitor, but a rival to AI?
I think it absolutely is 100%. We can
Yeah.
outthink AI. We can look at, um, I mean, we could task the best way to take all the AI out, right? We could look at what kind of solution that could solve the same kinds of problems that doesn't
Hmm.
involve AI, what that would look like. There are all
Right.
kinds of interesting things that we could explore using remote viewing or any other form of intuitive work.
Yeah.
It's all this kind of work is on a continuum. It's all of a
Right.
piece. So I don't even like to make that much of a distinction between people who call themselves psychics and people who call themselves remote viewers. And
Right.
it's we're doing the same work.
I
We're
agree.
just doing it, using different tools.
Using
But
different tools. You're absolutely right.
yeah,
But think of the power if if we can learn to organize or we get involved in a community like when you work with really tight remote viewers or
right.
other intuitives, that the what is the division of effort, right? What that
Yes,
happens. I mean, if you had just five minds focused on one target, you can do wonderful things. Imagine if you had 100 focused on solving one particular problem, and everybody. I just think that's such a beautiful thing when you can
I do
connect
too.
with
Yeah,
people like that and really solve problems. And
yeah.
that's what scares me about the division. I think that's seeded throughout the world. And I think that might be a reason for it, is keeping everybody divided.
I agree with that. I agree with
Yeah,
that. I think that, if we can pull humanity together, there isn't anything that we can't solve, but
right.
we're resource hoarding, right?
Yeah,
And that
yeah.
never bodes well for any community.
No, I agree.
Yeah.
I think, it's tearing us apart and it's tearing us down, but I think right
Yeah.
now is an opportunity
I do
for us
too.
to really band together and make that change, make that impact.
Yes. Yes.
Mhm.
I think it's needed. I think we're heading into well, we're certainly heading into UFO disclosure. That's absolutely going to happen.
Yeah. And what do you think
And
that will look like?
well, it's it's hard to say. I mean, I haven't. I need to look at this again, actually, with
Yeah.
remote viewing, to see where it's at, because so much has changed. But when we looked at it, it's kind of interesting. 25 years ago, TDS, I was obsessed with disclosure and was giving it out, and we were looking at timelines and all this, and we kept
Right.
getting it was going to be between 25 and 30 years in the future. And at the time, it's like, oh man, that's like
Yeah,
so
it's so far
far. I'm
away.
going to be
Yeah.
an old lady. And now here I am, an old lady, and we're finally here.
And it's happening. Yeah.
It's happening. I think that, I mean, what I honestly believe is that since 2017, Lou Elizondo coming out on the scene and the New York
Right.
Times article, the Tic Tac,
Yeah.
you name it. Since then, that has been disclosure. It's been a slow
Agreed.
rollout to get the
Right.
whole public used to hearing this terminology, used to the idea, and they'll eventually trot out the president, whoever it happens to be at the time, to say we
Right.
are not alone. But I don't like the framing it in terms of national security threat. I think that that's just another layer of control that they're
Yeah.
trying to exert on the public right now, and trying to frame it that way so that you know
Well, fear, I mean, when you keep
we're
people
happy
afraid,
giving up our own agency so that the
right.
government can protect us.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. And I think what I look at, and this comes from my background in
Yeah.
intelligence. What aren't they saying? Right? What aren't they sharing? Like when this first came
Right.
out, no one's talking about who or what's piloting these things. That those questions were
It
never asked,
I
and
know.
no
It
one's
was
in a
like it was like the things were just floating out there by
yeah, they're
themselves. I know.
there. No,
Right.
I
Exactly.
remember like screaming at like because Tucker Carlson, I was proud that he was one of the first, mainstream reporters
Right.
to at least acknowledge it. Like I have to give him
Right.
respect for that. But at the same time,
Yes.
in the podcast I did, screaming at him on my podcast, like, you are a journalist. Why didn't you ask these questions? You hit these talking points. How can you not think who's piloting them? And how can you not think, let me go back and interview all these people in the 80s who said they were abducted? Why aren't we bringing them out there? And they have all these reasons for it, but to me, that's just very suspect to me that any
Yes.
investigator wouldn't publicly, if you're disclosing things, wouldn't be saying, what about this stuff?
100%.
Yeah,
I am 100% there because it's like but I followed this subject my entire life since I was 7,
exactly.
well, like 10
Yeah,
years old when I figured out what that was that I saw.
right,
For 40 plus years, 50 years, whatever. And then, yeah. And now they're talking about, oh, this is a national security threat and these hotshot Top
right,
Guns, saw them. But yeah, what about all the cool sightings through the 70s, 80s,
right,
90s? What about the Phoenix Lights? Thousands of people saw the Phoenix Lights.
right, right.
Yeah.
And they don't want to. They never brought it. And they give the answer. Well, we want to go through credible people and train observers,
Right.
which I get. And you want things that you
Yeah,
have
sure.
evidence and things of that nature. But you can still ask the question, right? You're the
That's
government. You
right.
can still assign a department or an agency to say, you need to investigate this aspect of this. Like, why wouldn't you be thorough, right? Here's the verifiable stuff that we have evidence, but we have a lot of people saying this over the years that there might be something to it. Let's investigate this,
Right.
which I'm
Right.
sure they have. I mean, how
Of
can you not?
course.
But you're not talking about it. And that's the frustrating
Yeah.
piece. That's what I want to hear. This other stuff, when I listen to these guys talk, they're trained observers, they're great at their job, they're military experts, but they have no clue what they're seeing. They're no different than us, other than they're a little bit closer to it, unless we've had our own encounters. But they really
Exactly.
don't, all they can say is, yeah, I saw this thing and I don't know what it was, but here's the technology that verifies what I saw. But they don't
Right.
know what they're looking at.
They don't know what they're looking at. They don't know at all.
Right.
It's a mystery. And then now this whole past few weeks we have all those drones. I like how they're using the
Yeah.
word drone now all the time to describe
Yeah. Uh-huh.
anomalous
Yeah,
objects floating
I
out
just saw
there.
Jersey, New Jersey, which is,
New
the state
Jersey.
next to me.
Wow.
They've been having these drone swarms that the FBI is actually investigating right now, seeing what they are. And they were just over DC a couple days ago too.
If
Yeah.
they were actually drones by hobbyists or even an adversary, they have the technology to take them out.
Oh yeah.
They
Yeah.
none,
Hmm.
none of this makes sense.
No, no, we're definitely in. I mean, yesterday was Cliff High did a project he tied in the future forecasting group, and I guess it was trend. It even made Newsweek. It was supposed to be Alien Invasion Day yesterday.
Right.
Um, and I don't know that that was necessarily the. I think the internet kind of ran away with that.
Yeah. Yeah.
But we are seeing more and more of these things that are out there. And is what's trending more just people talking about it? Is that the data that was coming back? Right? Everybody's talking about this thing. It went viral.
Right.
Is that the
Right.
feedback for us? I don't know.
Yeah.
Um, but I'm curious as to what these things are and what their intentions are. Are they happening more now, or are we just reporting it more now? Is the question.
Right. Or are we even co-creating this reality?
Yes,
That's another
yes.
possibility.
Yes, I agree. I think that we have a lot more, and I know we get into down a woo rabbit hole here. If not
Right.
co-creating, are we shifting timelines, right? Like,
Yeah,
here's my perception, here's
exactly.
my belief, here's where I'm
Exactly.
going.
Right.
And
Right.
what's interesting is that, the Gnostics talked about this. They talked
Yes.
about the aeons and then the aeonic copies, right?
Right.
Which, if you read the Nag Hammadi, the aeonic copies are these copies of reality where the
Right.
soul thinks that it's its true self. It's like, oh, you're going to
Exactly.
virtual reality to learn something.
Yeah.
Do we shift into these different things and have these weird experiences and then phase back when we learn? And that's what the download is, right? So
Right.
I'm
That's
going off now.
right.
You got me excited, but it's so, yeah. I mean, maybe we are co-creating these. I don't
Yeah.
know.
We might be. We absolutely might be. And,
Yeah.
we could be calling them in. We could be, just having so many new people new to the field. It's like my UFO group, I started it a year and a half ago. First meeting, I had, maybe 10 people show up. Now we're
Right.
filling every
Yeah.
room, and,
Wow.
and it's mostly people that are new to the subject.
Yeah.
So just that awareness can might be
Think
calling them in.
and think about that. what, 20, 30 years ago, 80s,
Yeah,
90s, like
right.
you were looking over your shoulder going to one of those meetings and not wanting people to
Exactly.
know, and you were there was a lot of
Exactly.
fear and shame, and now
That's
it's out in
right.
the open, which is amazing.
It is.
I've never done CE5. Um, I know I've talked to some people who say maybe this is a dangerous thing because we don't know what we're dealing with. So I don't know either way. I can't comment on it. But I often wonder the fact that people say they can call them in. Maybe there's some greater connection to these things that we're not aware of, right? If they're responding
Right.
to us. Maybe it's not we're
Right.
reaching out to these ETs. I mean, at one point they say humanity was the caretakers of the garden, right? How do we know this isn't
That's
a
right.
component of the planet that we've just forgotten how to access?
Yeah, yeah. I have been multiple CE5 type things.
Okay.
And you could see orbs and all kinds of interesting things, but to me it feels like a different phenomenon almost
Right.
than flying saucers and
Okay.
triangular shit. This feels more organic somehow. Whatever's happening in that
Interesting.
CE5 space to
Yeah.
me almost feels more like an earth spirit type
Hmm.
of
Yeah.
energy.
Interesting.
Yeah,
So there's so many different things going on. How do we keep
there
it all
are.
straight, you
I
know?
know.
Yeah, it makes me think of a question though, when you're jumping back, talking about
Yeah,
looking at a project through the experience
right.
of the entity, right?
Yes.
Do you take anything back with you? Number one, is there any risk in doing that? Number two, like, are they perceiving you, and is anything coming back with you when you're doing that?
Yeah, they do perceive, well, I'd say most of the time.
Uh-huh.
Some don't seem to be that telepathic, say,
Right.
but the ones that are highly telepathic, they absolutely know. And I've never had anyone follow me home or
Right.
anything negative happen. I tend to like approach this with a lot of positive energy and a lot of like just love
Yeah.
when I do one of these sessions where I decide I'm going to be the alien for the purpose
Mhm.
of the session. I come in with love. And that's like number one. And I just like envelop that being with everything I've got positive
Right.
wise. And I
Mhm.
think that that sets up the tone of the encounter.
Right.
So I've never had a problem. Now, I know it's a hot topic out there in remote viewing. Should
It
you
is.
even be looking at these kinds of targets and can it be dangerous? But and I've thought about it a lot.
Yeah.
In 30 years as a remote viewer, I've never had anything that followed me home or any kind of hitchhiker effect or anything I
Right.
felt was negative. And the more I think about remote viewing, the more I realize, well, I'm already connected to whatever this is.
Yeah.
It's already right there. So yeah,
I'm curious about the hitchhiker effect. And we've looked at that pretty extensively too in some of the
right.
projects that we've done.
Yeah.
Um, I'm finding, and this is just my opinion in my limited
Yes.
scope here, but people who come into remote viewing that have had psychic experiences and ET experiences, I don't think we're as vulnerable because we've used to dealing with this. We're used to dealing with the fear, the anxiety. It's not something that's new to us. It doesn't shock us in the same way, as opposed to you take someone who's like, oh, what's this RV thing? And you sit them down. And this is why, all the teachers I talk to don't give an ET target to a brand new remote viewing student because they don't have the capacity to process that and to deal with that. I don't have a worry looking at even some of the scary ET targets. I haven't ever brought anything
Right.
home.
Right.
And because in my experiences in life, when I've encountered things, I've learned how to set that boundary and be like, we're not doing this today. Go away. And I
Right.
think that makes a
Yeah.
huge
I
difference
think
having
that
that
that's a
experience.
that that's a healthy attitude to have. And I think that there's a lot of truth behind what you're saying. I think that those of us who feel called to really
Right.
explore all these crazy and exciting things, yeah, it is because we already have a body of experience
Yeah.
through, which we can filter it all. But yeah, somebody who's super green,
They're gonna, yeah, it's
it
gonna,
can be a shocker.
it can be. And I wonder if that then opens the door to bringing things home for them. to having those other
Yeah.
experiences, or the perception of it. I mean, you're calling these things in, right?
Right, right.
That's your worldview, that's your belief. So now maybe you're bringing that stuff in with you. I don't know. I
Yeah.
haven't, I'm not in a position to research that any further, but
Yeah.
it's
And I
something
think
I
if
think
I think
about.
in some cases, it's just you're opening that aperture for the first
Yeah.
time.
Hmm.
And what might be happening is you're just, you go, maybe you're home the whole time, right? But
Right,
but
right,
yeah, you go home, you are home. But maybe because that aperture is now open, you are perceiving things that are just normally there
right,
that
right.
that you never noticed before.
Yeah, that's a really good
Yeah.
point. When I was a kid, I was raised Catholic as a kid, so I
Me
would
too.
feel things, right. It's a
Right.
common journey. I'd
It
feel things
is.
around me, and I'd be
Right.
like, it's evil, get out, because I would just feel it. And
Right.
as I got older, I said, you know what? I don't, maybe it's not all bad. And I
Yeah.
started discerning what feels safe to me and what doesn't. And most things I was like, oh, okay, it's just there. It's fine. I'm not worried. And then I started getting information about what these things might be and oh, it's a relative or whatever it might be. And the fear went away. And so it wasn't this perception that there's all these demons that are around me trying to attack me and feed on me all the time. And it was more like
Right.
there's stuff that exists and I'm able to sense them sometimes. And that's usually
Yeah.
about my day. But it took time and experience to go through and figure that out.
Right.
What a fascinating world we're living in, Birdie. We've covered quite a bit in this hour. Is there anything else that you want to acknowledge or mention before we wrap up our discussion tonight?
I've had a wonderful talk with you, Dennis. This was
Yeah,
so
this was
much
excellent.
fun.
I
Thank
really
you.
enjoyed it.
I
Absolutely. I
did
appreciate you
too.
being on the show. Do you want to plug
Yeah.
your website really quick or?
Sure. Yeah. My website is No Rivets, just like how a spaceship has no rivets.
Oh, wonderful. Wonderful. And
NORIVETS.com.
I'll have that in the I'll have a
Yeah.
graphic of it as well so they can
And
see
I'm
it.
No
Fine.
Rivets on YouTube. And
Oh,
I'm
perfect.
starting now to post one live remote viewing session a week.
Oh,
So
wow. How's that
yeah,
going for you? You enjoying
I
that?
just posted one yesterday, I think, on what did I view? Oh, I viewed it was just like a random one I pulled out of did it blind, of course, from a
Right.
big target pool, and it was the opening ceremony of the 1980 Winter Olympics in Russia. And
Oh,
that happened
wow.
to be the Olympics that the US and many other countries boycotted.
Hmm.
And anyway, it was pretty interesting. So
That's cool.
everyone's welcome to go and check it out. Watch me
That's neat to see it
do
live.
my
And
thing.
what was neat about it, last thing I want to say, I watched your TikTok presentation, and
Yeah.
you're there, and there's people in the room. They've got cameras, and you've got this, two cups of like markers and colored pencils, and when I first learned about remote viewing, it was like it needs to be in a clean room and nothing can be in there. And I'm like,
I know.
there's no way I can
I
get my
know.
space that clear. Like I'm in a
Exactly.
center now. I'm building my office right now. That's why it looks so clean and bare behind me. It's just a new place I'm building. But I've got stuff everywhere. There's no way. So I listened to Joe McMonagle not too long ago, and he was saying like I wanted to learn how to view in all conditions and all situations,
Right,
which
right.
has been my philosophy from the beginning. When Dad said it's okay to be anywhere, you're fine. That was all I needed to hear. So watching you
Yeah.
go through that remote viewing and like people are saying stuff and you're laughing, you're going through it like you're not always in this like, lotus position on this altar. Like you're here, you're very present, but
That's
you're still
right.
tapped in. And that's really neat to be able to do it that way.
Exactly. Yeah, my
Yeah,
students chose the TikTok for
that's
me
cool.
to view, and so
Yeah,
that was
wonderful.
super fun.
So people can watch you do that live every week on YouTube. That's pretty
Every
awesome.
week on YouTube, I'm doing something random.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
All right.
Surprise
Well,
to me,
Birdie,
surprise to you.
it's always a surprise, right? But it's
It
neat.
is.
I think if you're interested in learning remote viewing, and this is what I say about, the future forecasting group, every
Yeah,
week you get to watch these talented viewers
exactly.
go through their process and talk through their data. And
Yeah.
that's how I learned. I mean, I got formal
Yeah.
training from dads, but really sitting there and just watching them go through their process. When I go through my sessions, like, oh, here's how they created a movement for themselves. Here's how they recorded data.
Right,
Just
right.
listening to that and watching other
Mm-hmm.
people do it. And as you're trying to find your own style, absolutely watch transdimensional mapping and see that if that resonates with you, that's the way that you should go follow.
That's right. And you can include a map, in a regular CRV session. Get a big
Yeah,
piece of paper out and
absolutely.
absolutely.
That
It's a
sounds
nice,
awesome.
yeah, a nice little technique. And hey,
I
we
did,
should do a collaboration sometime.
that sounds great. Yeah, let me
Yeah.
know when. I'll be excited to
Okay.
do it.
Okay. I
Absolutely.
would too.
Wonderful. All right, Brady. Well, I really enjoyed this. Thank you so much for coming on the show and having this discussion with me tonight. So, Birdie, thank you. And on behalf of the
Thanks,
Future
Dennis.
Forecasting Group, I'm Dennis Nappy II. Thanks for watching.